Hi everyone, welcome to Acrylic Spillis. I'm Alex and this is my first YouTube video. Now with Christmas around the corner, I was thinking to myself, what happens if Space Marines and Christmas sort of met? So I got myself an empty snow globe and an empty Christmas tree bauble. Now I'm thinking if we can make a mini diorama in these, in the spirit of Christmas, might be pretty cool. So let's find out. So before we start, I'm going to go through some of the materials I'm going to use throughout this project. Obviously we've got the bauble, the snow globe, we're going to need some cork of various shapes and sizes, cheap regular super glue, and I've got some Gorilla Glue clear, specifically for the snow globe, and a craft knife. And then for later on in the project, we're going to need some cat litter, clean obviously. That hasn't been ground up at all. This one has been, so there's varying shapes, and there's actually some there that's just like a light powder that's going to be used for the texture for the base. So first things first, chop some cork. So basing, we're going to be using a lot of cork, which we're going to cut up and try to make it seem as organic as possible. And I've used the wine corks so that they'll function basically as a base for a piece like this to go onto. So the reason I'm cutting into this now is so that we can help build up the diorama inside the snow globe. I'm trying to make it a organic sort of shape so that it's more readable. And remember, symmetry is kind of rare in nature. If you ever look at rock faces, there's never any symmetry really. It's all very flowy and organic and sharp angles everywhere. Okay, so now we've got our cork all cut up and looking very rocky. Now I'm going to start assembling it. I've already glued those two pieces to the base, so they're sturdy. Now the plan is to glue this onto there to give our marine a platform, and all these excess pieces that we used to carve all these pieces here, we're going to use these as a form of rocky terrain around the base. But obviously we've got to be very careful to not go down too close to the edge so that we can still attach the top of the globe. I'm also going to attach these smaller pieces underneath so it creates an outcrop, but I'm not going to glue those on yet. I'm going to need to paint it, and if I put that on too early it's going to be a pain to try and paint those. So now I'm going to glue the rubble at the bottom of this. I'm using the Gorilla Clear because obviously this is going to be fully submerged, and from what I've read, this stuff is pretty much waterproof once it's cured. I'm making sure not to get too close to the edge so the top of the snow globe can screw on without being restricted. Okay, so I've glued the rubble at the bottom of the base, and to add a little bit more interest to it, I'm going to place some skulls that I got from the Citadel skull box, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. So hopefully that will just add a little bit more interest. Now all these excess bits here that I didn't use, don't throw them away, because in the future you can use them for other basing projects that you've got, because they make really good stones and add plenty of texture. So now, to seal all that in, I'm not going to use the Gorilla Glue Clear because that's quite thick, but what I'm going to do is this really cheap normal super glue that you can find in most hardware stores or supermarkets. I'm just going to drip that on to basically help seal all the bits that haven't come in contact with the Gorilla Glue. Right, so all the glue has now been applied, and we've now got our base with some funky orc skulls and the top ledge. And remember, I said we're not going to put the side ledges on yet, because obviously if we want to reach these rocks and the orc skulls, we need to be able to get to them. So I will be priming this black, including these side pieces, but the side pieces will go on after I've painted all the underside here. So yeah, see you in a sec. So this is going to be quite a heavy brush of this. for the initial coat, because ultimately this is going to be a winter scene, but I still want the rock to have a bit of character. The next colour I'm going to use is dark sea blue. The reason I'm using this now is to bring some coldness back to the stones, because this is going to be, again, a winter scene, so the rocks wouldn't be a warm colour, in my opinion. Still quite a lot of paint on here, it's not like a fine dry brush, and I'm not trying to cover all of the brown, I'm just trying to provide some variation in the rock. And as you can see, I'm being quite heavy-handed with this because it's just dry brushing, it's not precise. So as you can see, we're starting to build up a little bit of variation in colour, because stone, even though a lot of us think of it as just being like, oh, they're grey or they're brown or beige, there's still quite a lot of variation in the colour of actual stone. Now, to add a lighter shade to the rock now, I'm going to use AK Interactive Dark Blue Grey. I'm going to mix this roughly 50-50 with the Dark Sea Blue. So again, being quite heavy with the dry brush. And even though it's a little bit lighter, you can see that it's still quite cool in colour, which is what I'm going for. Again, no need to be delicate. We'll be getting more delicate in the highlighting stages. Okay, so now we're going to use dark blue grey from our previous step, but not mixed with the dark sea blue. And this time I'm going to remove quite a lot of the excess. I'm going to do that with one of these makeup brush sort of cleaners, which I find really useful as a dry brush palette. There's a little less paint on here now, so it's not covering as much, but that's what you want. Now I'm going to add dark blue grey from our previous step, but this time I'm going to mix it with AK Interactive white, and you can use any white that you like. I just personally quite like this AK Interactive white. And again, I'm going to remove a lot of excess to try and be a bit more precise with the dry brushing, picking out those edges and point of interest in the cork. And don't worry about the skulls, we'll be painting them after we finish this step. So as you can see, we've built up that colder stone coloration that we want to see in a winterscape. So now the final step, I'm going to mix the dark blue grey and the white again, but this time it's going to be 1 part dark blue grey to 2 parts white. Just that final highlight. And then finally, we're going to use pure white. Again, just try to pick out those very top highlights. And with that, the main body of the rock base should be done. Now all we need to do is repeat those steps, but on the side pieces. But before we do that, we need to paint the skulls. So now we are onto the skulls. The first colour I'm going to use is Grim Brown by AK Interactive. I'm going to use a size 2 brush for this, just to get the job done quicker. You don't need to use a fine brush for this step because you're literally just base coating. Oh, and there's my cat. Well, it's not actually my cat, it's my in-law's cat. Come and say hello. So for the next step in painting the skulls, I'm going to use British Uniform Base by AK Interactive. This is very similar to XV88 by Citadel. I'm going to use a size 1 brush for this because we need to be a little bit more precise now. Just pick out the edges where it'd be lighter on the skull. As you can see, I'm not going all the way down because I want to retain some of that shadow. And with the teeth of the skulls, you want to just not go all the way up, just on the from the tips of the teeth. Again, just to give them that sort of weathered look. For our next highlight colour, we're going to use Australian Camouflage Brown, again by AK Interactive. So again, we're just going to pick out the little highlights, just to provide some interest and depth. You can actually leave it here if you wanted to, but I'm going to add a few more highlights just to really push contrast. I'm going to use Cream Vice by AK Interactive for the final highlight. You could go a little bit higher if you wanted to, but I'm just going to finish it here. So I'm using the Artis Opus size 1 from their M series. Just the tiniest of little marks now. Okay, and now you just repeat that step for the remaining skulls. With all the skulls done, I'm now going to give this a few coats, probably 2 or 3 coats of gloss varnish before we put the side panels on, so that I can make sure all of this underneath is completely covered, because obviously this is going to be submerged, so I want to protect the paint as much as possible. Now, to emphasise the winter scheme, I'm going to make some icicles out of UV resin. I put a little blob onto my silicone mat. Now what you do is you get your little shaping tool and you gradually just drag it down to a point, and because there's quite a lot, I push it in the other way as well, because that way you can either make one really long one or you can cut it into 2, so you get 2 for the price of 1. Now you use your UV light because this is UV cured resin, so this effectively hardens it. Now you get your little scrapey tool and you should see that it just starts to peel away. And there you go, there's your little icicle. I dab a little bit of the resin onto the area where I want to attach it. Now this is a bit finicky, but it is doable. Grab the icicle that you want to place, and now you just want to push it to where you want it to be. And now I shine the UV light on it, that should cure it and stick into place. Okay, so now that the base has been painted and varnished, it's now time to add the Blood Angel Space Marine that I painted earlier, complete with a Santa hat that I made out of milliput. So now I'm just going to use the super glue, put on the feet, pick a spot where I want him to be, and I think he's going to go there. Hold for a second. So there we go. I went for Blood Angels because, you know, Santa, red, why not? And in addition to that, I made some little presents to go on the base as well, and they are made out of milliput, same as the Santa's hat on the Marine. It's worth noting, with the hat, the Marine and the presents, I did a few coats of gloss varnish on those, and then I put some semi-matte varnish on there as well. Now, to finish it off, before we submerge it, I'm going to use some AK Snow Terrain, and I'm also going to use some snow sprinkles as well. So I'm just going to put some of the Snow Terrain all along these edges here, and where I've attached the icicles, it's good just to cover those so that it sort of hides where you've joined it with other resin. And again, to be honest, you can do this as much or as little as you like. So now that the Snow Terrain from AK Interactive is dry, I'm going to add the snow sprinkles. The reason I do this is because it's got a little bit of a shine to it and gives kind of like a frosted effect, which I think is really going to help sell the sort of snow effect. But again, I'm not going to use this everywhere. I'm just going to use it in certain spots just to emphasize sort of ice element. I'm also going to add it to some of the icicles to sell that sort of frosted sort of effect on them. So the Space Marine and the presents added to the base, and again it's been coated with varnish just to try and seal it in. It's now time to actually get onto the tricky bit that I've never done before. So I'm going to fill it probably 3/4 of the way with deionized water, because deionized water won't go like stagnant like tap water will, and then probably the last quarter will be glycerine. So fingers crossed. Right, little disclaimer, I added some Mod Podge dishwasher safe to the model before I submerged it, because even though I added a few layers of varnish to it, I felt that the varnish wouldn't last in the liquid, so I wanted to be extra sure, because we don't have that paint bleeding, or even the varnish, to be honest, to start to bleed. So thankfully it seems to work, so I highly recommend getting some of that if you're going to do it. So things I do differently. Firstly, the Gorilla Glue. I would just use your standard super glue for this, and I say this purely because the Gorilla Glue took ages to dry, and standard super glue seems to be working perfectly well on the parts where I didn't use the Gorilla Glue. I'd also look at the basing, and when I say basing I mean all that rubble I put at the very bottom. Now, it looked really good, but then as soon as I submerged the model with all the glitter or whatever particulate you guys decide to use, you do lose a lot of that detail. So it's just whether or not you want to put that time and effort in. Or maybe you could just use less particulates in the water so that it won't be covered as much. Again, do what you like, it's all fun at the end of the day. So ultimately, it's very fun to do, and I highly recommend you guys give it a go. It'd be very interesting to see how you guys approach it and the diorama that you guys create. So if you guys want to undertake this project yourselves, I've included links to all the materials I've used throughout this project in the description below. And if you guys are wondering about the bauble that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I've decided that I'm going to do that as the next video I produce, purely and simply because this is already quite a long video and I don't want you guys to get bored. And yeah, I think it'll be very interesting for us to have a go at next time. And I know that it's going to probably be after Christmas, and I do apologise. This video took longer to do because Christmas is manic, as you guys know, but I still think it's something you guys will enjoy. And finally, I'd really like to say thank you to everyone in the hobby community that has shown me support on social media and have actually encouraged me to produce a YouTube video and channel. It's meant the world to me, and I was very surprised at the support I received. I wasn't expecting it. It's really motivated me, and yeah, I can't say thank you enough. So thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you've enjoyed what I've produced and you find it interesting, please like and subscribe, because I'm going to be producing videos quite regularly going forward. And now time for the reveal.